Welcome to the Chapel Thrill Podcast with Hunter Caparelli and JJ Jones.
How are we feeling, Tar Heel Nation? Welcome to the 6th episode of the Chapel Thrill Pod, your home for all things Carolina basketball. I'm Hunter Caparelli, current sideline reporter, studio host, and analyst for ACC Network Extra. Joining me for the first time is a brand new guest on the show, national college basketball writer for the Athletic, UNC Duke beat writer, Brendan Marks. How are we doing, Brendan?
Doing great. Thanks for having me. Appreciate you.
Great to have you on the show. Since we aired our last episode, North Carolina flew down to Dallas for a matchup at home against Wake Forest. The Heels then traveled cross country to the West Coast for their first conference games on the road against Stanford and Cal, which didn't go the way they wanted. They were both quad one opportunities for UNC that they both let go. We'll break down the Heels' performance on this episode, and we'll preview a couple of their next ACC matchups, which includes a huge ACC battle on the road against Virginia in a couple weeks. Brendan, hopping right into it, what did you see first impression from the back-to-back losses from the Heels on this West Coast trip?
Yeah, I think you have to start with the defense. And, it's not just these two games. Obviously, these two games were the continuation of a larger trend. It's now been four straight games that UNC's allowed, I think, at least 81 points. They've allowed their opponents to shoot over 50% overall. I think they've allowed at least 13 threes in each of the last four games. And I wouldn't have even looked it up. Since conference play began on December 30th, UNC ranks 204th nationally in adjusted defensive efficiency. They're third worst in all of Division One in effective field goal defense. So,
That's insane.
yeah, it's really bad. You obviously you gave up 95 points to Stanford, and Ebuka Okore is an awesome talent. He's one of the leading freshman scorers. He's great. But Carolina's ball screen coverages, their transition defense, their miscommunications, all of it is kind of a mess right now. And until that gets fixed pretty immediately and pretty substantially, it's hard to see this team kind of picking up where we thought it might be able to go earlier in the year.
We spoke a little bit about it before we went live, but how would you characterize Hubert Davis's evolution as a head coach since taking over at UNC 5 seasons ago, and where do you think it stands right now with him at the helm of the program?
Yeah, look, so Hubert got a contract extension last offseason, so he's tied to the program through 29-30. So he's got four
Right.
more years after this year, effectively. If UNC was to move on from him after this season, it would be a $5 million buyout. It's not an exorbitant buyout by any means, certainly considering what UNC might have to pay on the football side of things in a year or so. Different conversation entirely. I think the thing about Hubert Davis is he's a tremendously nice man. He
Right.
is, one of the nicest people you'll meet in college basketball. And he is prone to having bouts of awesome offensive coaching. I think that when left to his devices and when given the resources, you look at this team, I think he is a smart roster builder who may have to learn some things along the way. And obviously last year, the front court deficiencies speak for themselves. I don't think he's a terrible team builder. I think he's, a good offensive mind, but defensively, North Carolina's continued struggles, continued inconsistencies,
Right.
um, for whatever reason, whether it be the actual on-court coaching with he and his staff, whether it be the miscommunication in terms of conveying what he wants his team to do defensively. I think probably the biggest thing that's been a hallmark of his tenure as far as a negative would be is I don't know that the accountability has always been there. And that was
Mhm.
earlier under, Caleb Love. And, that was obviously back at the beginning.
Right.
I think you could say it more recently. Caleb Wilson's been fantastic, but there have been a lot of things about Caleb Wilson that probably need to improve and haven't. And
So,
so overall, this sort of slippage, three losses in four games, suddenly looking like you might be more like a 6 or 7 seed compared to a top four seed. If North Carolina doesn't make a run in the tournament, I do think we're probably at the point where we're going to have a conversation in the offseason about is Hubert Davis still the guy that UNC wants, leading the long-term future of the program.
totally. Following up on that, there were obviously glaring, things that didn't look well with the team in these last two losses. If they were to make a deep March Madness run, what would they be improving most importantly over the course of conference play?
Yeah, n number one, I think Hubert already made a step in the right direction with starting Derek Dixon against Cal.
Totally.
I think that was a necessary move. This is a team that hasn't been able to hit water from a boat shooting wise, and it has led defenses to totally collapse on Caleb Wilson. He has struggled with double teams thus far. So I think adding Dixon as a legitimate perimeter shooter has helped things in that regard. Luka Bogovac's continuing to get it going in that way. Jonathan Powell getting it going that way. Even Jaden Young to a lesser extent getting it going that way. I
That's
think
a good
all of
one.
those things, those have to happen, right? They
Yeah.
have to happen. So I think that's a step in the right direction. And then defensively, they have to get back to at least like a baseline level of competence in the ball screens. Um, as we know, and as Carolina fans know well, like guards win in March. Guards are probably looking at Carolina's pick and roll defense right now and thinking barbecue chicken. So if they don't improve that, and I'll give Hubert Davis some credit. He has tried being more versatile with his coverages this year. Traditionally, UNC has only played drop. They've only played ice. He has tried hedging, he has tried trapping, he has tried doing some other things, but it hasn't happened nearly consistently enough. And so maybe it is you just go back to some of the basics of what he's always done, and it's not going to be as threatening or aggressive, but like it prevents some of the just crazy probing that's happening right now. But without continued growth shooting wise to prevent defenses from collapsing on Caleb and Henry, and without getting back to some level of baseline ball screen coverage, it's really hard to see this as a second weekend team.
Yeah, adding on top of that, this team was really good defensively, I think up until the last four games, where they've been allowing over 90 points a game. Before that, they were at about like the 66, 67 point mark. So something's definitely changed defensively over the past couple of games that I think they need to harp back on and maybe look at some film from non-conference play. Outside of Caleb Wilson and Henri Veesaar, which players specifically on the roster do you think is most important to the Heels being able to reach their ceiling and why?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably still Seth Trimble.
Yeah.
He's regressed defensively too, and
Hmm.
he's not fighting through screens to the level he used to. And it's hard to know how much that forearm, which obviously he broke and came back from, it's hard to know how much that's like bothering him or inhibiting him. He's obviously never been a tremendous shooter, but he has not been nearly as sound defensively or as aggressive offensively, I would say.
Hmm.
Um, and then other than him, I mean, the other guy is Dixon. I think Dixon
Yeah.
is the guy who can kind of help all of the pieces coalesce. He gives you size defensively. He can shoot the ball. Gives you another handler, so Trimble doesn't have to be the primary handler all the time, which I don't think suits him to the best of his
Yeah.
abilities. Dixon, I think, is the guy who's like the X factor, where if Carolina
Hmm.
is going to make any sort of run, he's going to have to continue to play a larger role. But at the same time, like Trimble, we have seen Seth Trimble be a better version of himself than we're seeing right now. And whether some of that's injury or just, continued defensive slippage with the rest of the team, it's hard to say.
Dixon, it seemed like it took him a little bit in that Cal game, but that last stretch when the Heels tried to make a run to make that comeback, he had some awesome shot making. He seemed to really step into that point guard role, and I'm excited to see what can kind of come out of that in these next couple of games if he continues to start at the one. With the Duke UNC game coming up in a few weeks, I want to harp on that a little bit. How does that Duke UNC rivalry feel in this current era compared maybe to the prior Coach K, Roy Williams years?
Yeah, I definitely don't think there's nearly as much hate as there used to be. I mean, I
Hmm.
graduated from Carolina in 17 and, I went to a couple of Duke Carolina games when I was a student. And like the level of vitriol is certainly not there from the fan base. Like I don't think Carolina fans hate John Shire. I definitely don't think Duke fans hate
Yeah,
Hubert Davis.
yeah,
Um, but there is some frostiness between the coaching staffs. A couple of times after these games, we've seen some blow-bys, especially on the Duke side when Carolina has won the game. So like I think the rivalry's in a fine place, but ultimately the reason why it was as good as it was is because you had two Hall of Fame coaches and you knew that every single year it was going to be some of the highest level basketball you were going to see in the conference. And across the country, frankly. And so we have had that at times. Like I think last year was a great example, or maybe not last year, 2 years ago was a great example of that.
yeah.
Um, but certainly Duke has had the leg up for I would say probably the last 4 years in the rivalry.
Since the
And
Final Four.
since the Final
Yeah.
Four, and and obviously you look at this year's matchup, and I think it'll be a good game. I think they're
Yeah.
like both teams have some similar struggles. Caleb Wilson versus Cam Boozer is going to be super
It's gonna
fun.
be that'll be cool.
But I'll be interested to see how this year's goes. But it could be great. We haven't had it as traditionally great as I think a lot of people are used to, though.
I think what made the California trip for UNC sting a little more was the fact that Duke made the same trip this past week. They just flip-flop games. Duke played Cal first and then Stanford, and in both games, Duke dominated. They beat Cal by 15 points. They beat Stanford by 30 points. So you look at that. Obviously, if you're a UNC fan, you already hate Duke, and seeing Duke play much better than UNC did in those two California games, it definitely makes it sting a little more. You mentioned it real quickly. Caleb Wilson, Cam Boozer. That's obviously going to be a top tier matchup, one of the best potential like freshman or just top player matchups in the country in a few weeks. What should fans kind of expect from that? Do you believe it'll be Boozer guarding Caleb, Caleb guarding Boozer? And what kind of fireworks do you think we'll see from that matchup in a few weeks?
Yeah, I definitely think that Caleb Wilson is going to be guarding Boozer a lot.
Yeah.
Duke does some different things defensively, so I could see things maybe getting switched around a little bit.
Yeah.
You could see some different guys guarding Caleb Wilson for Duke. The thing that's going to be interesting is like Caleb Wilson has the obvious athletic advantage.
Mhm.
He is a freaky athlete, and Cam
It's
Boozer, for as
insane.
productive as he is more of a below the rim player.
Right.
However, on the other side of things, Cam Boozer can legitimately stretch the ball from three. And if he's able to lure Caleb Wilson away from the paint, can he then take advantage of him by shooting over him? Can he back him down? Can he attack? Caleb hasn't been great with closing out and being super disciplined that way. So like they each have a thing that I think objectively they're probably better at than the other.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see how many opportunities there are for like Cam to defend Caleb one on one. Like Cam is bigger. Cam is like
Yeah.
bulkier. He's stronger.
Yeah. It's huge.
But it's going to be a super fun matchup. Like they're both awesome. They're both top
Yeah.
five picks. Yeah, it's one of I've had it circled on my calendar for a very long time.
Yeah. It'll hopefully draw some good ratings, to say the least.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a
Yeah.
problem. So
Yeah.
I just hope that it matters in the grand scheme of the ACC standings, and it's not a game that just kind of adds to Duke's
Right.
tally.
Yeah. I hope so as well. A couple more questions here with Brendan Marks from The Athletic. What's one particular story about this UNC team you're most interested in tracking as the season progresses through conference play into tournament and March Madness play?
Yeah, I mean the Dixon one to me is the one that has the most potential for this team. Like you look at this team, you kind of know who everybody is at this point, right? Like
Right.
you know what you're going to get from most of these guys. Dixon's the one guy I think has still has some meat on the bone, so to speak. Like,
Mhm.
and obviously it's as a shooter, but I think defensively he can be big. He can fill passing lanes. Like again, as a creator, like he's not an awesome pick and roll scorer, but can he be a good pick and roll distributor? Can he, help people like Seth attack closeouts a little more easily with some passing? So I think Dixon is the one for me. Like you look at the rest of this roster and it kind of is set. You know
Yeah.
what you're getting from these guys. But Dixon is a guy who, to me, like if he takes off, can still make Carolina a second weekend team.
Right.
The rest of them, again, not that they're not good players, they are, but we've got half a season of tape on them. We kind of know what they are. He's the one who has the biggest like room left to grow, in my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. One of my last questions, you obviously have covered this team super closely this year. When you talk to people around college basketball and you're formulating your own opinion, what do you think the ceiling is for this team going into March? Are they a second weekend team? Can they get to potentially an Elite Eight or Final Four? Is the talent there? What's your prediction?
Yeah, I so at the start of the year, I would have said that I thought this team had Elite Eight sleeper Final Four potential. I
Mhm.
actually thought, I likened this team a lot to the one from 2 years ago, which was so great defensively and at times needed
I
RJ
agree.
Davis to pull a rabbit out of his hat on offense. I thought this team kind of reminded me of that one because of the length. You obviously like with Stevenson, Wilson, and Veesaar, you have one of the biggest 3-4-5s in the country. Um, that obviously has not materialized as I thought. I still think it can be a better defensive team, but to me, like if this team makes the second weekend, I think Hubert has done a good job to sort of turn around some of the slippage. Like right now, this looks like currently, if Carolina was to play an NCAA tournament game tomorrow, I don't know that they would be favored on like a neutral site as an 8 seed against a 9 seed.
Right.
Just because the guard play is so uncertain.
Yeah.
And Caleb Wilson, for as great as he has been, has not yet shown the ability to consistently beat double doubles. If
Mhm.
you are an opposing coach in the ACC right now and you want to beat North Carolina, you throw doubles at Wilson, make his life hard. You out physical Veesaar in the defensive glass, which he's super long, but has proven a propensity to be taken advantage of there. And you make the guards beat you. You make Kyan Evans and Luka Bogovac and Jaron Stevenson. You say, look, if you guys are going to hit 10 to 12 threes and we're going to lose that way,
Yeah.
we'll tip our cap to you. Um, that's why I say I think Dixon sort of changes the calculus for this team because
Mhm.
he does prevent some of that doubling on Wilson. He can alleviate him as a handler. Um, right now, I would say like I think for Hubert Davis and his staff to like kind of convince the fan base that they are still the people who should be in charge of the program after this year, I think you probably need to at least make the second weekend. Anything less than that with this talent, with this payroll, you have probably a top 10 payroll in the sport that can't be
Mhm.
ignored anymore.
Mhm.
You have one of the five best players in the country in Caleb Wilson. If all of that still leads to a first or second round exit, especially one where you're giving up the sort of defensive looks that you were the past two games on the West Coast swing, that's the sort of optics that you put it all together and you start wondering, okay, is this the guy still? Right now, I'd say that I still think they can be a Sweet 16 team, but I struggle to see because of the guard play them going much further than that, especially because the top of college basketball is really, really good this year.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. Brendan, this was great insight. I really appreciate you giving us, our audience, the national perspective on North Carolina. Make sure you're following Brendan Mark's work at The Athletic. Thanks so much for your time. We'll step aside for a quick break, and when we return, we'll react to what we just heard and look ahead for what's next for the Tar Heels. Thanks, Brendan. Welcome back. We just heard from national college basketball writer for The Athletic, Brendan Marks. He had great perspective on this current North Carolina basketball squad, JJ. Brendan made an interesting point about this UNC's team ceiling for March Madness potentially being a second weekend team, but after these basketball losses, maybe not. When you hear that, what do you have to say, and where do you think this squad is right now with about 2 months of conference play remaining before ACC tournament play?
Yeah, I think they need to find what's going on. There's definitely got to be an internal factor, something going on because you've seen the way these guys have played throughout the season so far, and then you have this blunder of losses. Stuff like that doesn't just happen, especially for I guess good ball teams, teams that have good heads on their shoulders. There's something missing or there's something just going on that I think fans don't understand. But I mean, it's been tough just being a UNC fan or just being a basketball fan watching Carolina. And I've always been hyping them up. And you watch these guys and they've started to shake these last few games. But I mean, we'll get into it. I mean, all respect to the other teams that they play because I mean they have just been shooting the lights out when they play UNC. But I mean, we'll hop into that. But it has been a little bit. It hurts. It hurts watching this team play right now and with those losses. But I think they're going to come back from this West Coast trip with a lot of motivation. And Hubert has a lot of wins in the next few weeks that he needs to get for us UNC fans to feel normal again.
Since we aired our last episode, UNC had a home game against Wake Forest where they almost squandered a 15-point second half lead. They ended up winning that game 87 to 84. So we saw a couple troubling signs on the defensive side of the ball, and then that came to haunt them in the West Coast trip. Stanford, that first loss was blistering hot. They used a late 7-0 run to defeat UNC. They hit 16 out of 28 threes, which was the most three-point shots made against UNC in the Hubert Davis era. And it really felt like that while they were playing. The Heels led the game for 38 out of the 40 minutes, but just couldn't finish. And 10 of those 16 threes that Stanford hit came in the second half. When a team is shooting the ball that well, JJ, do you think it's adjustments that UNC has to make on the defensive side of the ball, or do you just have to tip your hat to the other team for being able to, hit the shots from the outside?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think if you have a game or two like that to where they're having a great shooting outing, they're shooting the lights out that night, and just a team does that maybe once or twice, all credit to the team, absolutely. But in these last four losses, we've seen it in every single game. And so eventually it's not, okay, kudos to this team. It's no, these teams are coming in, exploiting our weaknesses, seeing that they can get a lot of shots from beyond the arc and just shoot the lights out. So I think that's definitely become a situation of concern at this point right now, especially after this last game. I think it's definitely just need to continue to work on the defense and not let these shots get up. Contest a little bit more shots, and just you know you can't just hope and pray that they don't make shots. I mean, we're at the Division I level of college basketball and probably one of the greatest conferences. These guys are here to play. They can make plays and they can score.
Right. And when you look at that Cal game, it was really two parts of the game. You had the first 30 minutes where UNC just didn't seem to play anywhere near hard or well enough to win the game. And then you had the final 10 minutes where the Heels went on a ferocious rally. They almost erased the 19-point California lead. But to complete a comeback like that, you need to be able to hit your free throws and you need, some official calls to go your way. They had a couple calls go their way in the second half, but when free throws are hard to come by and you're not converting, the UNC's at the bottom tier of free throw shooting in the country right now. They went 17 for 28 from the line. That's 60% in that California game. You miss nine free throws and you lose the game by six. It makes a difference.
Yeah, especially just because you like you just said, you missed these free throws. You talked about that before, free throw shooting, and we always love this UNC basketball team. They're tough. They compete hard. They did have that great second half stretch, but again, like I alluded to earlier, this is the kind of conference where you can't build yourself and get into these deficits and get down so early that it's that if you do make a comeback, people are like, "Oh man, that's a great comeback." Like you can't that doesn't happen often. So, like Cal came out shooting great. UNC looked like they didn't want to be there, and we kind of talked about these West Coast trips and it just you never know what you can get out of these West Coast ACC teams, and I'm hoping that they didn't go to the West Coast thinking that it was going to be a walk in the park because we clearly can tell now that just because they're on the West Coast, they got a different time zone, don't mean that they can shoot the lights out and still play basketball with these East Coast teams.
Brendan mentioned it earlier. One of the big changes UNC made was a starting lineup change. They moved freshman point guard Derek Dixon into the one spot in place of Kyan Evans, who had been struggling there over the past couple of weeks. It was Dixon's first career start for the Tar Heels, and he responded big pretty late, hitting a couple big shots. He finished with 14 points with three assists. What were your thoughts on the point guard change? And potentially having Dixon at that one spot moving forward.
I think we talked about it before. I think this is the right move that UNC needs to make. Not a shot to Kyan Evans. I think that we saw what Derek Dixon could do earlier in the season and just the explosive plays that he can make and the game changing plays. And we're at that point of the season where it's like, okay, if I'm Hubert, I don't care about what class you are, your seniority. I want the best players out on the court. And right now, Derek Dixon is the best one we have on this team. So you have to have him out there on the court. I also like seeing Jaden Young get some more minutes. I think I know I personally was always either, Derek Dixon, Kyan Evans, you got Seth, you got Luca, but, I really wasn't super high on Jaden Young, but I think he's came in and he's in the minutes that he's gotten, I guess he's played really well with the minutes he has, and he's taking advantage of the minutes. I like to see what he can do a little bit more moving forward, just because our guard play is so shaky. So there's no solidified. Okay, these are the guards we have to go against. So I think this team, unfortunately, unless they get their stuff together, this is going to have to be a guard by committee team. But teams don't want to see that towards the end of the season because that's not a good look for the team. But you know, but again, shout out to Derek Dixon for going out there, first career starting, contributing in a great way. I think he'll probably be the one moving forward.
Yeah, Dixon and Young weren't the only guys off the bench who have been contributing well. You had someone like Zayden High who came in at the end of the first half, who a lot of UNC fans didn't really know what to expect from, especially at the start of this year. He came in, he hit 3 shots, scored 6 points, right when, California just wouldn't miss a three. So when, you're giving up a bunch of baskets on one end, it helps when you have your backup man, big man come in and get a couple of baskets. Between him, Jaden Young, Dixon now coming into the point guard spot, and Jonathan Powell, I'd love to continue get more minutes off the bench. I think there's still a lot of room for improvement and a lot of room to grow. I think it's just going to be playing around with those lineups, adjusting and figuring out what meshes best. And just overall, I mean, looking at the defensive side of the ball, I feel like UNC every year has like prided themselves on being like a no paint team, not allowing opponents to get into the paint. But I think what this group has to understand is you can defend the paint while also having a sense of urgency to get out and defend the three, which doesn't appear like they've been able to do the past couple of games. They've defended the paint really well, but have been giving up a lot of open threes. Defensively, do you think there's some big adjustments the Heels have to make? I know in the last game specifically, Hubert had them going from man to zone, back to man. He was messing around with a bunch of different things. Defensively, what do the Heels have to do to get back to what they were doing originally during non-conference play when opponents were not even scoring 70 points?
I think you literally just said it to perfection. Hubert's making these guys play in the paint, but they don't have the urgency to get out and guard the three. I think that's literally the exact way this defense is playing. I understand if you're a paint presence team, and UNC has always been like that, but still, sometimes you got to hedge in the paint. You got to be able to play your man and your zone, and just make sure no points happen in the paint.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you still got to understand that UNC is watching this. Like the players, they're seeing the tape. They're seeing what's going on during the games. They understand what's happening. They should know that teams are out shooting them. They should kind of have that in the back of their mind. Like, okay, I'm gonna make sure nothing goes on in the paint, but I'll make sure I get a hand up. Because at the end of the day, I'd rather take 2 than 3. I'd rather you have 2 points than 3 points because threes add up way quicker than twos do. And I understand that Hubert's kind of giving them that philosophy, but it's just tough seeing that they're trying to have all these different kind of zones and switching to man, switching to zone, switching to man. Some teams can do that, but they're elite. They're winning consistently, and there aren't rooms for improvement. I would like to see this team kind of have one calling card to which they can depend on. And even though in the past it was a huge paint presence, that those were teams in the past. This team might not be that kind of team where it's okay. We can't let everybody score in the paint. Sometimes you got to guard the three. So something's going to have to change soon.
Last 4 games specifically, UNC's opponents are hitting 128 for 232 from the field and an even 50% from three. So over 4 games, every other three-pointer has gone in the basket. It's a tough formula for trying to get wins. In the last game specifically against California, UNC was able to get the deficit to 6 with just under 2 minutes left, but they just couldn't convert down the stretch. Seth Trimble had a nice drive in, turned the ball over. There were a couple of turnovers down the stretch. Turnovers have seemed to kind of been a constant theme over the course of this season wasn't as detrimental to the team early in the year, but has really struck them badly over the past couple of games. Do you think just more of an urgency to be less sloppy, be more committed just to protecting the ball? Do you think that's an area where if we could figure that out, it could, resurrect the rest of conference play?
Yeah, because at the end of the day, you can't do anything without the ball. So turnovers are always going to be a huge thing that UNC needs to tighten up on. And like you said, it seems like these turnovers and these blunders are happening late in the ball games when we need them in these closer games. So yeah, they just need to continue to fix their turnovers. We saw that as well. against Stanford. I mean, UNC had 11 turnovers to their 8.
Right.
And if it doesn't matter any game, I'd stamp it after any game. If you have more turnovers than the other team, you're probably going to lose. So
Right.
honestly, I think the two things that they need to start working on is stopping the turnovers that they're having, cause more turnovers. Okay, so that'll make let me do 3. That'll be 1 together right there. And then, like I said, stopping the 3-point. I'm looking at this UNC Stanford stats, and UNC went 6 for 16 from 3. Stanford hit as many threes as UNC took in that game. You
Right.
cannot let that happen. Stanford goes 16 for 28, and just it's been like that for the past few games. So it's just like there's a lot of stuff we got to work on, but stopping 3 and stopping the turnovers need to be at the forefront of this team's mind in terms of their defensive philosophy the next few games.
100%. Carolina, looking ahead, will make the trip home back from the West Coast now. They'll get ready for one of 2 home games in the month of January. That first one happens this Wednesday at 7 o'clock against Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a solid ACC opponent. They're right on that fringe of the top 75 net rating. So it'll be a fringe quad 2, quad 3 game, but really should be a great opportunity to bounce back for the Heels and get a win at home. UNC is still undefeated at home this year, 11-0. Marcus Burton, he's their top player for Notre Dame, averaging just under 20 points a game. So we'll definitely want to see someone maybe like Trimble lock him up. Obviously, you play Stanford and their top scorer, Okori, had almost 40 points. So definitely don't want to see that again against Notre Dame on Wednesday. And then after that, the big game coming up next weekend at 16th ranked Virginia. Their ranking might actually go even higher. They had a couple big wins this past week. So that will potentially be a game on the road against a top 10 opponent in ACC play. Ryan Odom, the first-year head coach for Virginia, he's really resurrected that program after replacing longtime legendary coach Tony Bennett. I think after these past 2 losses, that game against Virginia is going to be pivotal and crucial for this UNC squad to get back on track and really build back up their resume. What are your thoughts on this home game on Wednesday against Notre Dame and then this huge matchup on the road against Virginia?
I think, like you said, you took the words out of my mouth. It's pivotal. It's a pivotal game. I think not even just the Virginia game. I think just getting another win under our belt against Notre Dame on Wednesday is going to be huge. I mean, Notre Dame's coming into this game losing 6 of their last 7. But again, we now have seen we cannot take teams like that lightly just because of record. I think they lost to Cal by 1, 71-72, and they lost to Stanford. Well, they beat Stanford by 7. So
Yeah.
it really doesn't matter what teams you've played and what they've played. It depends on how you play that team that night. And like you
Right.
said, with the Virginia game, again, like I've started to watch this Virginia team, a historic program. They continue to play team basketball, and I think that's the biggest thing about these guys is there's no, I guess, huge gap in scoring differential between each player on the team in terms of their top scorer. Versus you look at our team, you're going to have Caleb up there, you're going to have Veesaar, and those and the gap between those two and the rest of our guys is going to be pretty large. Virginia, their top players averaging 16, second averages 14, third's
Right.
averaging 11, then you have 10, 10, 10, 9. Like these
Yeah.
guys are playing together. The assists are well, so I think it's going to be a huge game that UNC needs to win. It's not a hope we win. We need to win, and we need to win both these games, and you got to come out on top, especially with the conference play. That's going to be very, very crucial after these, 2 conference losses on the West Coast. Got to come back to the East Coast and make a statement.
Virginia is on a current 5-game winning streak right now. They have this entire week off before playing us next Saturday, whereas we have the game against Notre Dame in between. So Virginia will have some time off to prepare for us. Like you mentioned, their top player is actually freshman forward, Tysta Ritter. He was actually the freshman that was ranked ahead of Caleb Wilson in those original freshman rankings, where in our first episode, we had no idea who he even was. We just some international that someone in a freshman ranking had ranked him ahead of Caleb Wilson, which we thought was blasphemy, but he's actually been playing pretty well. I wouldn't say he's at the Caleb Wilson level, but
Absolutely not. But
he's been
still, definitely up there.
playing
Definitely up there.
he's been playing well enough to lead Virginia on a one loss season, two losses against Butler and Virginia Tech, and they're now a current top 10 team. So that's going to be a really big game for UNC. It's going to be a tough environment, like it always is at Virginia. But if I was to make a prediction, I think based off these last couple losses, I think Hubert's going to light a fire under this team. I think they're definitely hearing the outside noise. Social media, say what you want about it. You can try to avoid it as much as you can, but it's definitely gotten a lot louder over these past couple of days because of the losses. So I think Hubert's going to hear that. He's going to light a fire under this team. I think they'll take care of business at home against Notre Dame. And I think they'll get the upset on the road against Virginia next Saturday. What do you think?
Again, like you said, social media is a huge factor. I think Hubert knows his seat's a little warm right now, so
Yeah.
he's got a pep under his step as of late. Like you say, he's gonna light a fire under these guys. Um, I think those last two losses is just we're not used to seeing that, and I don't think the players. I think the players are just as shocked as we are. They know they're better than that. They have the better players. I mean, they have the better coach. So I think that they come back home. They understand that these losses they look bad on the program. They're going to get their minds right. Hubert's going to help them out. They win. They beat Notre Dame easily, and I think they go up to UVA, and like I
Yep.
said, I wouldn't even call it an upset. I think these are two same tier teams. I think that this would be a great win for the team to get them back on track.
I think betting wise, Virginia will probably be the favorite in the game,
Absolutely,
just
yeah, yeah, yeah,
based off recent play, being
for
at
sure.
home. So in that case, it would be an upset, but it's definitely a huge resume building game for UNC. One of my last final thoughts based on these past couple of games is I just think the offense has looked very one-on-one based. Everyone's talking about the defense not performing to standards, but offensively, I think they just need to get back into moving the ball around, trying to find open players, setting off-ball screens, cutting to the hoop. I feel like there's been a lot of isolation offense, not to say Caleb Wilson isn't great at playing isolation offense, but what it's resulted in is a lot of double teams coming Caleb's way, and that's forcing some of our other shooters who maybe aren't the best three-point shooters. They're more, facilitators to the rim, basket getters. That's forcing them to shoot threes that they might not be able to make. I think this team offensively just needs to get back into just moving the ball around more and getting away from kind of that isolation offense. It's been very one-on-one based, and I think that would be a big improvement for this team.
Yeah, I think we definitely have seen that. Now think about it. Game of basketball is a game of 5-on-5, not 1-on-1. I
Yeah.
understand that we have the players who can win the 1-on-1 situations, and like you said, I think the biggest thing is, I think every team understands what Caleb Wilson can do. It's no longer a shock. It's no longer like, okay, oh, he might go out there and play well. He's going to play well every night. So I think Caleb's got to expect that he's going to have a lot more attention from the defense from now on the rest of the season. And I think that gives an opportunity for the other players to make the plays instead of just going out there and, okay, well, he's not scoring, so let me go score. I understand having
Right.
that mindset of getting to the basket, making the threes, go and getting a bucket. But at the same time, if your shot's not there, your other guys are out there who want to score as well. So make sure we get the ball moving a little bit. And I think, like I said, I think just turnovers and offense just instead of all these
Yeah.
one-on-ones. But still, don't get me wrong. I think Caleb Wilson's still the greatest, best freshman in the country. Don't get me wrong. I think he continue to go score and make the plays. But in terms of just the whole offense philosophy right now, we need to start moving the ball around more and continue to get to the fast break like we used to. And yeah.
Even in that last game against California, he had a couple spectacular dunks, putting guys on posters left and right. It's being overlooked a little bit because of the loss, but he's still playing out of his mind. I mean, his hops are insane.
Mhm.
He's putting players on posters left and right. So I hope he continues to still do that, and hopefully it'll start resulting in wins.
No,
But
absolutely.
that's going to do it for this sixth episode of the Chapel Throw Pod. We want to thank Brendan Marks for joining the show. Me and JJ will be back to provide our thoughts and opinions on UNC's next couple ACC matchups that we mentioned and previewed, which includes Notre Dame and Marcus Burton, Virginia and Tyster Ritter, and then a home matchup against Syracuse and Kyan Anthony before the huge game at home against current sixth-ranked Duke and front runner for Player of the Year, Cameron Boozer. It'll be a Caleb Wilson versus Cam Boozer potential thriller. I brought it up with Brendan a little earlier. I'm super excited for that matchup. I think the country is anticipating a really big and awesome matchup between those two.
Yeah, it seems like just we love pitting competition against each other, especially when we have young superstars. And I think Cameron and Caleb are definitely the two biggest names right now in college basketball. Cameron's a legacy player, continuing to dominate, live up to the expectation. And you have a guy like Caleb Wilson, who we knew was good, but we didn't know he was great. And he's going out there and he's being the vocal leader, the focal point for this UNC basketball team. I think it's gonna be a great matchup. I mean, just in terms of UNC Duke in general, the game's always going to be good, but it seems like this year, this matchup between those two guys is a matchup that we haven't seen like that in two freshmen who have the ability to be top 5 draft picks going at each other in pivotal games for their team.
100%. We'll be back in 2 weeks for a bigger preview of that game. It'll be a pretty big show for the potentially the most anticipated head-to-head duel of the season between two players. For JJ Jones, I'm Hunter Caparelli. As always, go Heels.
Go Heels, go Heels.